Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I would just like to thank everybody on behalf of the family for coming out to share your love and your support with them this morning. With that, I would like to just remind everyone to take a minute and silence their cell phones, and I would like to invite Michael's son Marco up to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I've been trying to get ready for this. I wanted to thank you all. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted at the range of people that have come here today. Some friends from our youngest days, from many miles away, all the grandchildren. I'm blown away. Thank you so much. And we're really celebrating an amazing life. You know, it's like, and I know you all have expressed condolences, but the guy had a crazy life and an amazingly beautiful death, and it's something to celebrate. At the conclusion of the service, we're inviting everyone to come over to 510 Johnny's for a reception. All the details are in the back of your program. If you need handicapped parking, it's around the back, and there's a full-size elevator. And the last thing my dad told me was, I'll pay for all the appetizers and soft drinks, but you pay for your own alcohol and meals. Okay, so that was his last utterance to me. The response to the communications about my dad's passing have really been overwhelming. In Flemington, where he taught, from West Virginia, if you look at the map of web traffic, it's all over the country, even a few from India. I guess he knew someone there, he knew everybody. Hundreds of comments on Facebook and the tributes on the site have just been absolutely astounding. So, I wanted to welcome all of you, and especially those who are viewing online. There's many people who could not make it. And we so appreciate the support you've shown during this time. So I'd like to invite one of Dad's pastors, Ken Tipton, to come up to do an opening prayer. And then we're going to hear some from the families. So, Ken?
Father, thank you for the privilege that we have to be here to celebrate this life that was well lived. And Father, I've found out so many times in my ministry that it's not hard to say good things about good people. So we thank you for that opportunity. We ask you to bless this family. Mike had a wonderful, long life, but there's still a big void in their lives. So we thank you for the way he lived, and we ask you to let this family and friends feel your presence around them this day. And we ask this in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So in just a minute, I'm going to have my mom come up, Mike's wife, and then I'm going to open it up to anyone who would like to, if you'd like to just say a few words about my dad. I'd like you to come up to the podium because we're doing this online and let people be able to see you. So if you're comfortable with that, just take a few minutes after that. So Mom, would you come on up? My awesome mama. My awesome mama. Come on up.
Okay. Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming. Cannot believe the crowd. Unbelievable. I am the one and only wife of Mike Ciavolino. We've been in and out of marriage a couple of times. You probably have heard the story. He's the father of our 3 children. Thank God they are. My grandchildren are here. All I can say is I have lost a friend. Mike was able to make friends everywhere he went, no matter where we were, restaurant, in an elevator, I don't know where, it doesn't matter, you name it, he made friends. I don't know what that magic was. Oh yeah, well it was him. People were taken in by his sweet personality. It's true. I will. They say in the Jewish religion, may his memory be a blessing to you. And when you think about him, that's a blessing. When you think about Mike Ciavolino, you know, we studied the Bible together. We watched baseball games together. He tried to teach me to do crossword puzzles, but forget it. I'm not smart enough. I will surely, surely miss him. We shared meals together, you know, because his mother and father were deaf, and my mother and father were deaf. Maybe you don't even know. So we both knew sign language, American Sign Language. So like at the table at Dakota where we now live, you know, like he would have a dish with pickles or something in it, and he'd sign to me, "You want some?" You know, so he, you know, we just shared everything. It was really wonderful, and nobody knew what we were saying because we used sign language. So anyway, that's what was that?
I said some of us knew what you were
Oh.
saying.
Yeah.
That's the owner of where I live, Dakota Jack. Is it? Yeah. Okay, well, this was a little card that that McComas left on the pillow. I got the benefit of that beautiful white rose. It lasted for 4, 5, 6 days, and it was very sweet of them. And that's all. I just wanted you to know that I have lost a friend, and he really was a good friend. Okay?
So my sister Gina, my niece Bonnie, and my dad's sister Doris are not able to attend, but they all sent video messages. So Mike, if you would start that video.
Hi. Well, I'm 61, so I knew my father for a long time. And I have many, many wonderful memories. I was trying to think of the ones that really have been close to my heart. Going to grade school and having him be my teacher, and being my teacher in 7th and 8th grade also. And family days at the Gorge, which was a wonderfully beautiful river that ran through the country and was rugged and natural. And we would sing folk songs in the car with my brother in the back seat, and it was just fun. And Saturday nights at home, we would often send for pizza and play cards for pennies, and then we put them all back in the jar. So we play 21 and 828, and summers in New England with our camper. And that was wonderful. We went so many beautiful, beautiful places. And as I became a wife and a mother, he celebrated all my joys and supported me through all of my rough patches. And one of the things that I loved most to do with him was to do crossword puzzles. Even when I was very small, he would do the crossword puzzle, the New York Times crossword puzzle, every Sunday, and he would let me help him. I'm sure when I was very little, I couldn't have been much help, but he always let me try. And as I got older, I was a big help to him because he didn't know any of the more popular songs or TV shows and such. So we've always done puzzles together. And since I moved down to Greensboro before moving to California, we started doing crossword puzzles over the phone, with each of us having the same book. And it continued for 15 years. And I figured it out with missing a few days every year. It came to about 4,875 puzzles. And it was truly the highlight of my day. And we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs. And at the end of every phone call, both of us always said, "I love you so much, and have a wonderful night. I'll talk to you tomorrow." So I never wondered what the last thing I said to him was. I knew exactly what it was. It was, "I love you, and have a good night."
One of my fondest memories of my Uncle Mike was that how he never ever forgot birthdays. He would always call me and play happy birthday on his clarinet or harmonica or his tin whistle. He also always sent a birthday card. My mother and I share a birthday, so in addition to my birthday card, he would send another card, but only half of it, and he would send the other half to my mother. He would tell us that we needed to get together so we could read the card. He would add some money and tell us to go to dinner at his favorite pizza place in our town called Cece's, which we would do and toast to him. I would describe my Uncle Mike as a jolly man, always smiling, always upbeat. I'll miss his smile and his laughter and those birthday calls.
My brother Mike was a wonderful brother and a wonderful son. In our growing up years, he was known as Mickey, and I would believe that it became Mike after he went into the Navy. I was 12 years old when he left for the Navy, and there was a number of years I never saw him. But when he came back, I was very proficient in the jitterbugging dance, and I was so proud when he came to watch me. Growing up, he always worked. He delivered the Saturday Evening Post magazines, and he would actually give me an allowance out of the money that he made. I think it was $25 a week. I'm not sure. That's a lot of money for back then. Mike and I were 6 years apart, so he was really my big brother. There were nights we shared a room. We always had lived in small apartments. We shared a room till he went into the Navy. There were nights he sang me to sleep. Also, there were nights when our parents would go out for the evening and they expected him to stay home to, quote-unquote, babysit me, but he generally did not do that. He would go out and make sure he came back home before our parents did. I never did tell my parents he did that. And of course, back then, the only things you could have to amuse yourself was the radio. And we were very attached to the radio. Mike loved music, and I became a lover of listening to music on the radio. And then we lived in an apartment where there was one long closet filled with clothing, and that's where he would practice his clarinet, so that the clothing would absorb the sound of the music and not disturb the neighbors. There were nights he'd come home, and his clothing would smell like campfire, because he and his friends, who called him Mickey as well, they would roast potatoes in a fire somewhere in the woods. I don't know where they would go. And strangely enough, those potatoes were called Mickey's. And his clothing would smell like the fire. I don't think my parents ever noticed it. At least I was not aware if they did. I do have so many fond memories of my brother. I am just so glad that on my birthday, which is also my daughter's birthday, this past Sunday, that I did talk to him, and we did speak to him on Monday as well. So that was the last time he got to play. So that was the last time I heard him play Happy Birthday for me. I will miss that so much, and I will miss him.
So I'd like to invite, if any of you would like, you can stand up where you are, if you'd like to share something about your experience with my dad. Many of you already have. Please feel free to, if you'd like to, let me know. Paul, do you want to?
Sure.
You were so instrumental in helping in the last few years.
Sure. My name is Paul Kwasniak. I had the blessing of working with Mike for 5 years. There's not enough adjectives to describe him. Loving, intelligent, knowledgeable, caring, and a couple of memories that'll last with me forever were the times that we spent in Bible study along with Don Bosserman, the times I spent in our personal visits, the couple of times we only got to share 2 times Veterans Day at Mission Barbecue, and also the weekly trips to ShopRite to get some groceries, and the main menu of his groceries was 3 granny apples. I'm a good person.
Would anybody else, sorry, I'm kind of losing here. Would anybody else like to say anything? Okay, that's fine. It is hard. It's very, very hard. So over the years we've been here, and my dad became a Christian many, many years ago, both New Covenant Presbyterian Church in Abingdon and Calvary Baptist Church in Bel Air here have been the churches that have ministered to him for years. Dave Barker is here, the pastor of New Covenant, and we think it's a church that I'm a member of. And then Calvary Baptist, Ken Tipton, who's going to come up in a minute, was the music minister and worked with my dad and a lot of the veterans. And so we'd asked him just to give a short message about my dad and this experience, and then he's going to lead you in the hymn that's on your program. So, Ken, come on, I'm sorry.
Thank you to the family for allowing me to be here in this celebration of life. I'm thankful to people like Paul in our church who are able to take some of our seniors and do things with them and bring them places they need to be. But this is a celebration of life, and I want to tell you that I have found out through a lot of years and a lot of funerals that death is certain. Death is certain. Mike lived a great life, touched many people, but life has to end here on earth so that we can begin a new life in heaven. The Bible says this about heaven. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling place of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tears from their eyes. And listen to this about heaven. There'll be no more death.
Amen.
No more mourning. No more crying, and no more pain. Well, the big question to me today is, and Mike knew this answer, how do we get there? The Bible says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him would never perish, but have everlasting life. It's not about our goodness, it's about his goodness. It's the same rules for everyone. Mike did a lot of good things, not so he would go to heaven, but because he was going to heaven. He did those things. In Ephesians 8:9 it says, for grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourself. And I'm so glad for not by works, lest any man should boast, because it is a gift of God. Mike Ciavolino believed that, he accepted that, he lived that, and he is in heaven today.
Amen.
Everyone has to make that choice. We may not all live to be 94. So the time for that is now. It is now. You know, I've known a lot of senior adults through the years, and then I became one. That's a way of doing it. So you may wonder how Mike and I got together. Well, he's from New York, and if you didn't know it, I am not. I didn't even know Brooklyn had trees. And I want to tell you where I came from, there was nobody by the name of Ciavolino. It was Smith, Jones, Tipton, Hatfield, and McCoy. That was the... But Mike loved music. He loved music. I loved the Bible verses, that when it just quotes music, it quotes music. And he loved music. It was a great part of his life. A great part of his life. Church music has been my life. It has been my life. It's what I've done forever. And I've been at Calvary 10 years now, and I work part-time. Whatever that means, I'm not real sure. But the first time I ever laid my eyes on Mike Ciavolino, it was by noise that I went, or by music. I'm sitting in my office, my brand new office, trying to get used to being at that church. I had retired from my last church. I heard the clarinet, and I heard it play. And so I walked out right through my office into the music room, and there was Mike playing the clarinet, and there was a young lady playing the piano for him. And that's where I met him. And they would repeat that off and on. In fact, until he got to where he couldn't do that, I was usually serenaded at least once a month and sometimes twice a month by Mike on his clarinet. And I wanted him to do some other stuff with me, music, playing the choir, but by then he was 84 and told me he just didn't quite have the breath to do all of those things. Another thing we had in common was the military. Now, we both served, but he was part of what I believe was our greatest generation. I have no doubts about that. I had a brother, by the way, I'm from a large family, born on my mother's birthday, but it took her 10 kids before she could get one on her birthday. And we had another. But I had a brother and two sisters that were older than Mike was. They're all with the Lord now, but my brother and three brother-in-laws were all in World War II. And the stories that I would hear as I grew up just fascinated me, that what these men and women went through just so that we could be sitting here today. He was part of that. Well, I had 5 World War II veterans in my congregation at Calvary. Now I have 4. Last year, I recognized all of them. I put their photo up on the screen, the video, and there was Mike with all that great hair. I asked him what happened to that, and he said the same thing happened to mine, and it kind of left us. But I put the picture up there, and I recognized these 5 people that had done so much to bring us where we were. Then I asked them that could stand, and there was 3 of them that could not, Mike and one of them that could not stand, and it didn't make any difference. Everyone recognized them, and then after the service was over, they flocked around. You know how Mike liked to hold court anyway. He loved that attention. But he couldn't make it this year. And neither could one of the others. Had 3 of them there. But I recognized them anyway for the service. Paul was ready to bring him, and he just couldn't come this year. Mike was a lot of things to a lot of people. And I found out a lot of things about him today and that you shared that I didn't know. I don't like crossword puzzles either. But I want to tell you that life is a gift. Life is a gift. And Mike was a gift to you.
Amen.
And to me. And all those he knew. A gift from the Lord to us. Apostle Paul said, getting ready to depart this world, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. Mike had.
Mm-hmm.
Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all of them also that love his appearing. So I say to you today, to God be the glory for the great things he did through Mike Ciavolino. Let's sing his favorite hymn. It's right on your sheet there. God sent his Son. They called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my sin. saw him on the screen with all the babies, and I knew he loved the little one. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and to feel the pride and joy he gives. But greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives, because he lives. I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Great song of victory. And then one day I'll cross the river, I'll fight life's fight, no war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he reigns because he lives. I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives.
So, I have the responsibility of doing some closing remarks. First of all, we have to express our gratitude, my family, my siblings, my wife, all the brothers and sisters-in-laws and so forth, for the just extraordinary number of people who came around my dad in his final days and helped him. More recently, the incredible staff at Forest Hill Heights, where my dad was originally, and Dakota Broad Creek Assisted Living, who treated my dad with such honor and extraordinary care right up to minutes before he passed away. Over the past year, the amazing medical staff of the Upper Chesapeake system and our incredible rehab facilities, our emergency services people in our county have brought my dad back at least 5 times from death. I've had 2 or 3 times in this year where I went to the emergency room and the doctor said, you better review his do not resuscitate document now, and that's pretty hard. But they brought him back. But this time, really nothing could be done. It was clear that he had a stroke. Nothing was going to change that. And so on Monday, July 29th at 4 a.m., when they got him up to go to the bathroom, he had a stroke, and he was going a little crazy. They put him back in bed. And over the next few days, hospice care kept him just super comfortable. And what was crazy in those first few days is he would speak on Monday and Tuesday continuously. In fact, all Monday night, my mom actually had to leave the room. Just like his brain was just spooling out, just a random assortment of memories, talked about restaurants, talked about family members, caregivers who were people who were right at his side. And at one point, either Tuesday, I believe, he asked Tammy for his harmonica, and he just played a couple of notes. Right? It's like his mind was just like grasping to kind of comprehend this. And the last time when she heard it, the wonderful sound that he had blessed so many people with over the years since the earliest days of his childhood. The last complete utterance he said to me was Monday afternoon when he sort of came out of it, and he said he was hungry, but of course we couldn't feed him because he would aspirate. And after about 30 minutes of him saying, I'm hungry, he finally said, stop this and get me some damn food. So that was literally the last complete sentence that he said to me. He did say other things. He did notice, did recognize me and so forth. So on Wednesday night, we started playing classical music and retired for the evening. And Thursday morning, the nurse indicated that he was unresponsive. And my mom sat by his side all morning and read scriptures and prayed. And then about 11:50 or so, they took her into lunch at Broad Creek, and I got there just about 5 minutes later, and he had passed away in that 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. He was still. I brought Tammy in. She checked it and said, yeah, he's gone. And he took his last breath and exited that amazing crucible of our soul and spirit, the incredible creation of our body, and was absent from his body and present with the Lord at that instant. Mm-hmm. The staff told me, and other people have told me, that sometimes someone will simply not die if anyone's in the room. Now, I believe them, and I suppose in a sense it's the very last spark of consciousness the loved one wants to spare others their precise departing and perhaps experience this last moment of intimacy of this world on their own. But that's indeed what happened. At that point, and some of you know, this whole process starts. And again, the staff at Dakota Broad Creek was extraordinary. They made all the calls within minutes, took impeccable care of my dad right up to the final days. They hugged us, they wept with us, they helped start the process that follows death. Within a few hours, the two wonderful men from McComas came. They carefully wrapped his body and quietly removed the room and left the rose, it's on the website, they left the rose and the note on the pillow for my mom. It's really beautiful, and they were just extraordinary. So my dad was born in 1924. Calvin Coolidge was president. It's kind of crazy. Rhapsody in Blue was played for the first time. The first Macy's Day Parade happened that year. So, that's a long time ago. There were no computers, very few televisions, people had party line phones. This was a whole different world. And so his life, like so many of people of his age, literally spanned unprecedented innovation and development in the growth of the modern nation. I mean, just think about it, what he has observed. From the streets of New York, the child of deaf parents and the deaf community, he answered his nation's call to defend our republic, and at 17 joined the Navy. Now, it's hard for me to imagine, and Paul mentioned that a little bit, so did Ken. He had his parents sign him in because he was too young. At 18, he and thousands of other young men and women found themselves in every corner of the world. I mean, translated from the streets of New York to the South Pacific, that's pretty crazy. He was on LST, which is a huge box-shaped ship that you always see as an afterthought in war movies. They're always like on the beach, but there's never any wars about LSTs because they were big, slow, ugly boats. But they literally moved the war. They transported everything. They were the C-5A Galaxies of World War II. He had John F. Kennedy on his ship at one point after the PT boat incident. They moved atomic bombs. They moved food, prisoners, machines, locomotives. Everything you can imagine, these 1,300 ships moved around the world all during World War II. So after the Navy, he was a tugboat crewman, which he's spoken about for years. And a few years ago, they arranged for him to go on a modern tugboat. It's quite interesting. But then he went to college on the GI Bill in New York, got his teaching degree, and taught in Harlem in the early years of Harlem. And that's where he met his friend Bruce Charpentier, and Bruce's daughter Rosalie is here, who I've known like forever. And they became very, very good friends and were a big part of our life for the remainder of our life. He also studied photography with one of the greatest photographers of this time, Sid Grossman. And after he got married and our birth and some other things, this is something none of you know, we moved to one of the first pacifist communes in the country, in New Jersey. Dave Dellinger had started it. He was this lawyer for the Chicago 7. So there I was. My sister Gina is on the front of the Liberation magazine, one of the early pacifist magazines. Then we moved around a bit. He helped my mom start her first of her two shops called Little Orient, still one of the greatest stores ever. And we ended up in New Jersey where my dad began teaching in the public school system, which he did for the remainder of his career up in Flemington, New Jersey. And he taught thousands of students. Now, many of them have left comments on Facebook over the last few days. Just blows me away. A lot of them were my classmates, and he was my teacher as well at one point. And on the tribute page. And some of them are interesting. One guy said, you know, your dad was my teacher, he taught me critical thinking, my brother took pottery lessons with your mother, and you sold me my first 10-speed bike. Like, wow, that's like cool, right? After retirement, my dad just, as you know, some of you who don't live here, he loved to travel in his little various cars that he loved. He moved to West Virginia, lived in a trailer, and just loved getting involved in all the music there. And he always, everywhere he went, he made a new friend, new experiences, and he finally moved to Bel Air when we compelled both my mom and dad to move here after saying we just can't drive out to West Virginia every time you get hurt and so forth. But along the way, as many have indicated, and this has always fascinated me, sometimes annoyed me, he always made friends. He always provided encouragement. He made sure he acknowledged your birthday. How many of you got birthday acknowledgments from my dad over the years? I know my children have had one every year. He had some really quirky habits that drove my kids crazy, like ordering wonton soup with the wontons on the side. You know why? More soup. I said, why? More soup. It's more soup. It's more soup. We're always wanting an extra cup or bowl so we can pour things back and forth at a restaurant, which again drove my kids crazy. Or at later in life, he always wanted to know everything about everything that I was doing, and I got really frustrated for a while, and then I just started just telling him everything. And then, of course, he wouldn't really want to hear it, and it was fine. But he was just very interested. He was genuinely interested. And he played a lot of clever games over the years, and Rosalie could probably remember some in camp. He was the cook at this summer camp where we all went, and he would put one banana in one pancake, and if you got that, you got like a special breakfast treat, right? And other similar games that he would play, all kinds of creative games. And he also had a fascination with helping people find information and resources, and some of you may experience that. Tell him something you're interested in, he'd find a resource, he'd record a video, he'd find a website, which, by the way, he actively used his computer right up till Sunday evening. This is amazing. And he was always willing to seek out and maintain friendships wherever they are. So, as you know, many of his friendships lasted for years. He would see you, he would call you, and so forth. But the past decade for me and Laura and Gina and my wife Susan and the other people around him and the grandchildren has really been a decade of service to the parents who gave us life. Laura has spent a ridiculous number of hours mastering the procedural labyrinth of senior care, which is just mind-bending. She had their affairs in perfect order for years, but still it took 3 hours when we were here to process it. Finally I turned to Cara and I said, wouldn't it be easier just to be eaten by a bear? And she didn't think so. She thought I should come to McComas when I die. But when Laura, we started looking for facilities for my dad, people were floored that Laura was looking a year out. Why? Because they said people call at the last instant. They need a space for their parent, and it's hard to do that. So we were well prepared. Gina, my sister Gina, who was on the video, she cannot travel due to medical conditions. But as she indicated, she spent hundreds of hours on the phone with my parents. She played crossword puzzles, talked to my mom. She did a huge part of this, of communicating with my parents and keeping them engaged. And that was absolutely critical. And then me and my wife, Susan, for the last 10 years, largely been the boots on the ground. I'm the 3 a.m. ER guy. I'm the one over at Chesapeake emergency room. I'm the emergency doctor run, you know, and that got pretty hard at times, but that's what we do for our parents. So we come to the last few months, which have been really interesting. As was indicated a few times, my parents were divorced in the 1980s. And for most of the time from that, all the way up until about 10 years ago, they were basically at enmity. It was pretty bad. They couldn't be in the same place. When we were first married, it was very difficult. We'd have to have morning Christmas and afternoon Christmas. And, you know, it was very complicated. But when we compelled them to both move here, they became very good friends. And for the last 10 years, they have gone to restaurants together. They have done all kinds of things. And it was absolutely extraordinary watching that relationship rebuild. When it was clear a few months ago that my mom needed to leave Hartford Senior Living and go into senior care, Laura and I drove all over the county and looked at 10 places. and ended up at the end of the day almost not going up the hill, Jack, to Dakota Broad Creek, but we did, and it was like walking onto a movie set. It was absolutely amazing. And so we were able to pool my parents' resources and not only move them to the same facility, but in the same room, which is pretty crazy. We had a divider in the middle. And so at that time, I actually secured a license to perform weddings in Maryland. So if anybody's interested, just let me know. We considered having them get formally remarried, but the legal complications of that were so extraordinary, we just couldn't do it. But for the past few months, they've shared at the very end of Mike's life, and I suppose practically they assumed they were remarried, at least that's how they acted. And so I'll just say they were remarried. They eat together, they watch baseball and soccer, and many of my dad's favorite old movies, which my kids were complaining about last night. He would record hundreds of movies on VHS. They were terrible recordings of pretty bad movies that I think somebody said last night at dinner that nobody's ever seen again. But he loved them. He absolutely loved them. And they were very happy together the last few months. It was quite extraordinary. And much like my dad's mind was spooling out his life, you know, for myself, I'm sure I know the cousins, and for Susan and all the people that Laura, I found myself recycling little glimpses of little things that he did for us. As Gina said, traveling, working on cars, going to community bands, the crazy way he used to cook things, just totally, no recipe, just kind of make it up as it goes. You know, just all kinds of amazing things, and you know, it's just hard. So now we come to the end. The last two requests my dad made to me in the last few weeks was he wanted to go to the baseball restaurant out on Route 1. You know, some of you know where that is. Yeah. He's been there before, but he wanted to have breakfast. That's fine. And he wanted to go down to the Naval Academy, and we were not able to ever arrange those two things. We won't get to do that. But beyond those two things are the literally thousands of touches and dinners and trips and discussions and experiences and love for each other that we were able to express and cultivate over the last decade that now becomes an indelible part of my life and so many of your lives and thousands of other people who are not here. So when my dad was at camp, Bruce Charpentier, again, who he started teaching with in Harlem, and I forgot about this till someone just told me that. So Bruce was the chief, you know, the camp. My dad was the chief. And I don't quite know how to say the difference, but there was some difference in the way you said it, right? So they just call each other chief. And so for the very last time, we're going to say to my dad, goodbye, Chief, and thanks for an amazing life. So I'd like you to close your eyes for a second. We're just going to play this last little audio clip of something that many of you have heard. So Mike, if you would play that last clip, that would be great.
Okay, here it is again. Happy birthday again. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, I would just like to extend many thanks on behalf of the family for coming out today. Thank you for all the memories shared throughout the day, and I'd just like to encourage all of you to continue to share those memories in the days and the weeks to come.